Hello, and welcome to ASALH Richmond Presents African American COVID-19 and Mental Health. This novel virus has run amok in the African American community, and as a community leader, along with our executive board, we felt a burning need and desire to present a series of webinars to address issues most pressing to our community. ASALH Richmond's executive board consists of Derek Vance, Vice President, Dr. Cassandra Boyd Willis, Secretary, Jay Allen, Historian, Juanita Coleman, Chaplain, and Courtney Quarles, Treasurer, and our moderator for today. Before we get started, please make sure that your mics are on mute. I would also like to acknowledge our videographer, Master Caleb Willis. Caleb, in less than 24 hours notice, created, produced, and edited the intro loop that played prior to the webinar. And lastly, Caleb is in the 4th grade and only 10 years old. Thank you so much, Caleb. We really appreciate that. Our next webinars will be next Sunday at 4 p.m. on African American COVID-19 and health disparities. And we also, with confirmed participants, will be Dr. Samuel Hunter, he's a pathologist, and Candace Johnson, PhD, MPH, RN, and a clinical professor at the Department of Family and Community Health Nursing. We also have another webinar scheduled, and that's for May the 10th. And that will be on African Americans, COVID-19, and human services. More dates and topics to follow. We are now streaming on Facebook Live. So if you know anyone who cannot join the Zoom call at this time, tell them to go to ASALH Richmond, and we will be live streaming this very same webinar. And for all of those tweeters out there, we have a Twitter account. It is at ASALH RVA, ASALH RVA. ASALH stands for the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. If you are going to tweet our information, please use the hashtag ASALH RVA Cares. That is hashtag ASALH RVA CARES. And lastly, if you are interested in becoming a member of ASALH Richmond, at the conclusion of this webinar, our online application is www.tinyurl.com/ASALH RVA 2020. Now, you're not going to remember all of those, so I will be putting those in the message chat shortly. If you have any questions for us, please feel free to email us at asalhrvainfo@gmail.com. Now, I would love to introduce Courtney, our moderator for today. And without further ado, Courtney, Aaron is her name, or sometimes she goes by Courtney, is a Richmond, Virginia native and graduate of North Carolina A&T University, where she was awarded the Carter G. Woodson Award for her research paper on double consciousness. She is a historian with an MA in public history and owner of the online Invisible Museum. The Invisible Museum was established as a free access online museum dedicated to expanding community accessibility to the history telling of marginalized groups and invisible people. The online collections available are created around scholarly works of up-and-coming historians, the personal histories of community members, and from the undertold stories of invisible people. She hopes to expand her museum to include traveling exhibitions and school programs that work to keep history relevant to the younger generations. Her website address is invisible-museum.org, And if you wanted to get more information, you can email her at info@invisible-museum.org. I will put those also in the chat. Courtney, are you there and are you ready?
Yes, I am. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you again for attending ASALH Richmond's first COVID-19 webinar.
Thank you.
Today, we are going to be discussing African Americans, COVID-19, and mental health. The first part of our series is designed to educate, inform, and develop our community about the effects of COVID-19 and what it has on mental health in the African American community. Before I introduce our wonderful experts, I want to go over a few logistics so we can get the most out of this webinar and the information our experts have to offer. First, we will have a 30 to 40-minute discussion, followed by a 10-minute Q&A. Please feel free to type your questions in the chat room if you're joining us on Zoom, or in the comments section if you're joining us from Facebook. You may submit these questions throughout the webinar as they arrive, and our chat moderators will note them so that we can ask our experts if time allows. Once again, thank you for joining ASALH Richmond's COVID-19 mental health webinar. To talk about this topic, we've invited Dr. Atasha Christian and Dr. Dennis Parker. I will start with Dr. Atasha Christian's bio. Dr. Atasha Christian is a native of New Kent, Virginia, and graduated from Morgan State University in 2003 with a BA in Sociology and Anthropology. She then received her master's in criminal justice from VCU. Dr. Christian obtained her MA in professional counseling in June 2013 from South University, Richmond, and her doctorate of education in counselor education and supervision from Agassiz University, Northern Virginia, in August 2017. Dr. Christian has 15 years of experience working with children, adolescents, and adults with a myriad of diagnoses, such as bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety, ADHD, trauma, and addictions. Dr. Christian's clinical work is based largely in the community, especially within marginalized communities. Presently, Dr. Christian is employed as Director of Operations for a community-based mental health agency and adjunct faculty at George Mason University. Additionally, she is branching out into new territory and establishing her own consultant agency, AMC Consulting LLC. Dr. Dennis Parker is an accomplished human services professional with over 20 years of experience coordinating and streamlining behavioral health, mental health, and homeless services for vulnerable youth and families. He currently serves as the Vice President of Caliber, formerly Association of Youth Residential Facilities. He is also the co-owner of Hope Incorporated, a human services organization which delivers complete social, mental, and behavioral programs to meet the needs of youth and adults. Dr. Parker also has expertise in policy development and has collaborated with legislators, community partners, and the workforce sector while working as an independent policy consultant in Arizona and the District of Columbia, and serving in the great state of Virginia as Chief Policy Analyst for the Virginia Department of Social Services. Dr. Parker has also developed partnerships with the YMCA, where he previously served on the board of directors. Dr. Parker received his Bachelor of Arts in History and Political Science from Virginia Union University, a Master of Arts in Business Economics and Public Finance from Virginia State University, and Doctor of Philosophy in Public Administration and Policy from Virginia Commonwealth University. So as you see, our experts are well-versed. They're going to be able to provide us with some new information on COVID-19 and how it is affecting mental health in the African American community. So to open up this discussion, I think we have all noticed that much of the conversation around COVID-19 has been focused on the medical aspects of the disease. Can each of you talk to us about why there should be a continued attention on mental health? and whoever would like to start first.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. So, what we do know is that naturally there should be a heavy focus on the medical aspects of COVID-19 because it is ravaging our communities because it is a virus. Here is what we also know. For those who are not physically impacted by this virus, our entire world is experiencing emotional anxiety and trauma as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And that's occurring because what this disease has done is equalized everyone's vulnerability. When we look at those who are impacted, there is this disease is no respecter of person, of socioeconomic status, of race, of gender, or religion. And so naturally, there's a huge amount of anxiety that's attached with that. What we also know is that there has to be continued focus on mental health because the lasting effects of this pandemic will expand in other areas. So it's not just medical impact, it's also going to be emotional, mental, and financial because the stressor of loss of employment and loss of income can also lead to more anxiety and also a presentation of far more depressive symptoms across our mental health area. And I'll transition over to our other expert.
Great, great. Thanks, Dr. Christian. I would concur with a lot of the things that you mentioned. I would also point out that at the end of the day, what we really need to spend a little bit of our attention is preparing for the after effects of COVID-19. Without a shadow of a doubt, it has uprooted our current living situation, our current normalcy, and being candid with you, in America, we pretty much have come to expect just doing what we choose to do, when we choose to do it, and how we choose to do it. This has created an impact on our life, and in certain regards, I expect elements of PTSD. That's post-traumatic stress disorder that will be ramified or have ramifications from around all different areas. But I would add, as a point of hope, is that even though this virus impacts our community at a more impressive rate or aggressive rate, based on some of the facts that was pulled together by young Caleb that highlighted some of those things, I would also add that we have a tremendous amount of resiliency as a community based on our history. And I just think that we need to point to some of those levels of expertise and use those as positive building blocks towards making our way through this pandemic, as we've done in several other crises throughout the history of America.
Thank you both.
Yes, ma'am.
I think you guys kind of touched on it a little bit, so I would like you to expand. How does a global pandemic impact mental health, and specifically within the African American community? And maybe you could tell us kind of what that looks like.
Which one would you?
Go ahead, Dr. Parker. You go first.
Thank you, ma'am. So I would tell you that I think that the reality is just keeping it real, is that some of us are in the house with people that we love, but they would tend to get on our nerves. Like, we are just in this place and there's no way to escape. We go outside and we sit on the deck for 10 minutes, but we then have to go back into the house. And then in certain instances, we have social distancing and other ramifications where we're losing people that are close to us, if not directly, but one person removed. I can tell you that I believe most of us have experienced at least one person removed, if not two removed from us. So there are issues of trauma that we're going to be dealing with. We're also going to have a number of other issues as it relates to social isolation. This concept of an online communication or online forum for handling or dealing with issues has been one. As I told you guys before the call, it's been helpful to me to look forward to something, to have some type of social interaction. As human beings, that's what we look and we crave for. So we're challenged in that regard to try to keep that connection and keep those connections going. Dr. Christian.
Absolutely, I agree. What we know is that we anticipate seeing an increase in diagnoses of PTSD, depression, anxiety. And we know that, and what will happen is that when individuals come in to meet with a counselor and they begin to talk about what started those thoughts and symptoms, it will quite frankly be linked to COVID-19. Here's what we also know. There are going to be some people who are going to come in to access treatment who quite frankly should have done so a long time ago. And that's okay. If COVID-19 is what gets you in the door, that's fine. But what will be vital is for individuals who are experiencing some symptoms that have lasted long before COVID-19 to go ahead and start accessing services now. What we know is that there will be times when individuals, especially around this time next year, will kind of feel some anxiety. And let me qualify what anxiety may look like for you, even PTSD. It's not necessarily what you see on TV with a person who is having a panic attack, although it can. But you may feel sick to your stomach. You may not be able to sleep. You may be cranky. And you may find yourself needing more human interaction during this period of time. That is absolutely appropriate when we're looking at how mental health will continue to look. I know for me, when I have contact at work now with someone, I probably talk longer than I need to, but that's because I'm not having that interaction. And full disclosure, when COVID-19 first hit, I experienced such anxiety because I recognized what we were facing. We were at a bottom of a curve, moving to a peak of a curve. And anyone who's done research knows there's a lot of things that have to happen to begin to flatten that curve. And I had to process my own anxiety and meet with my own counselor, because the counselor needs a counselor, right? And so I had to make sure that I was in a healthy space to be able to provide services to those who are in an emotionally vulnerable space at that time. I also anticipate that globally, and my hope is that for people that look like us, we will begin to heal within households and communities. The beauty of the Black community is that we are naturally and instinctively collectivist. We believe in our people. And so if we work hard to heal our people, and we become okay talking about mental health and what it looks like, then I think we have a really good prognosis to manage our mental health post-COVID-19.
Thank you. So you also kind of touched on social distancing, so I kind of want to move to that area. Since many of us are social distancing from one another and away from our coworkers, maybe family and friends that we're used to seeing on a regular basis, what do we look for to know someone is struggling, and what can we do to support them during this time? Dr. Parker, if you'd like to start.
Okay. So yes, a couple of things. I think Dr. Christian touched on a couple of points that I wanted to just reiterate real quick and then move to. I think the challenge for me in the beginning is because I'm a hugger. Everywhere I go, I hug people. I mean, and so this is one, because I'm a big guy and a hug is kind of disarming, and it helps for people to allay their concerns that he's not coming to get me. But two, it's just a natural affirmation with regards to connection and affection and feeling connected to a person. So the reality is that you know, what I've had to do when I have people coming into my office is to hit you with the, hey, how you doing? Give me the elbow, you know, just to connect with, because I feel those social distancing have some type of connection before I create the 6 feet of space between them. And I do that. Social distancing is a very important part of this whole conversation. But with everything, there's a positive and negative. Absolutely is going to help keeping the disease muted rate practice. But at the same time, you know, folks who are used to having close conversations,
I'm sorry to interrupt, Dr. Parker. It does sound like you're breaking up a little bit.
Okay. Okay, is that better?
I don't want any of our participants to miss what you're saying. Okay, now it
okay.
looks
Okay, is that better? But do I need to call back in? Am I good? I didn't move or anything. Hello?
It's better.
Okay, great.
Yes, sorry to
Let
interrupt.
me punt back to Dr. Christian. That's okay. We'll punt back to Dr. Christian and let you guys know that social distancing does have a negative impact on what we're experiencing. It will take some time for us to get back to things as normal once the public policy standards are eased. Dr. Christian?
I agree. You know, as I said, as a people, as a culture, we believe in convening together. And I'm going to speak very transparent because I feel like I'm talking to my people. We love a cookout. We love celebrating a birthday.
Absolutely.
And when we haven't been able to have those things, there is some loss there, right? And so and let's look at what is the unfortunate part as well of COVID-19 is not just the social distancing, but the loss of life. You know, there are people who have lost loved ones who cannot physically grieve and have that physical closure because you can't be in the hospital room. Funerals look different. And culturally, as a people, we view funerals as a celebration of life. And it's
Absolutely.
difficult because that's been taken from us. Right. And so when we're looking at now, how do I know if a person is struggling with a mental health challenge in the pandemic? It is difficult with social distancing, and this is the part, and I love technology, but this is the part when we're going to have to step away from some of our usual technology. So instead of maybe texting a person all the time, because let's be clear, I can be in a very severe depressive cycle, but still text you and respond like nothing's wrong. We're going to have to call, hear a person's voice. If you can use technology and FaceTime and social media, do that as well. But it's also going to be important. One of the questions that we often ask people that we don't listen to is, how are you doing? Listen to the answer, not just how you doing, because that's your salutation, but listen to what a person is saying to you. Also, oftentimes we talk about physical symptoms that we're experiencing that are actually linked to a mental health episode. So if a person is telling you, you know what, I have just had the worst stomach pain for a week, I don't know what I ate, it's probably not what you ate. There's probably some anxiety that you're experiencing. You know, when you just have a queasy feeling, sometimes that's your anxiety. Headaches. One of the things that we don't think about is that irritability and anger is actually really strongly associated with depression. And so that's okay. And so what's really important to remember is it's okay if you don't know what the symptoms are. It's not okay if you sit in silo, because that will increase your symptoms. And so what I would say is, for anyone, when you're doing a check-in with anyone in your life and you ask them, how are you doing? Actually hear that answer. And if there's something that seems odd to you, trust them enough and trust yourself enough, because it's coming from your heart, to actually ask them to expand on what they mean. And then always encourage them to get some help.
Thank you. I think that will definitely help, especially me, and I think probably a lot of our participants, just to be a little bit more aware of the people that are around us. We have to take a little bit more time and attention when talking to one another, because we're not always able to see that body language. So this brings me to ask you guys how maybe mental health crises different in children? Do they present themselves differently, especially with COVID-19? How do we as adults talk to the children in our lives that may be going through some mental health issues, and how do we recognize them?
Dr. Christian, I'm going to defer to you on this one. And then I'll come in.
Okay. You know, young people, children especially, children will tell you what they feel, but can't necessarily articulate it. And that's because they're 7, right? So that's not necessarily something that they're tasked with doing. Here is the first thing that I would say, that COVID-19 anxiety and mental health challenges will present in children. It will present like fear. And fear often in children also includes very distracted behaviors. You know, if your child just does something, you look at them like, now, why did you just do that? And they tell you they don't know, they're not being smart, they really don't know. And so that's important to remember. It will also look like children who cannot sleep, who normally sleep well, or children who are not eating the way they normally do. It may also present children who are very clingy to you and don't want you to leave the house. If you have a job and you're essential and you have to go to work, or even if you're working inside your home and your child really, really, really wants to be in your space, that's probably because they have an anxiety that something will happen to my parent, to my loved one. And that looks the same with us as adults. At 38, that's a fear that I would have of anyone that I love because I can't control for COVID-19.
Absolutely.
You know, and so one of the suggestions I give when you have young people in your home, limit how you receive news and information. And I did do that for myself. So if you watch the governor's update Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 2, you don't have to watch Maryland's update because you don't live in Maryland unless you live in Maryland. You also, if you watch the presidential update at 6 and you watch CNN, you don't have to watch Anderson Cooper and Chris Cuomo and Don Lemon. They are telling you the exact same thing because what's happening is your kids can hear it. As adults, we can receive the information, kind of process it, and go about our day. Children cannot. So when children hear words like death, or if you're talking about someone in the community who's passed away and you couldn't have a funeral, children don't have a way to hold on to that information and then release it. So really limit those conversations. Also allow children to play outside. If you have a front yard or a backyard, children need to actually release that energy that they have. For us, it may be going to work, maybe talking to a friend. For a young person, school has been taken. And so pay attention to your young person who is struggling a lot with not being physically near you. That child is probably very fearful that they could lose you.
Great answer, great answer. So I'm gonna speak a little bit towards the older type of children, only primarily because they come to mind because both my children are 15 and 20. And even though she's 20, she's still my child. This was her first year at college, and she was having a bang out semester, a bang out year. And all of a sudden, spring break turned to the end of the year. And so her challenge was to get back into the groove of being in the house with her mother and her brother and living a lifestyle that she thought she had given up almost 6 months ago when she left to go to college. So there was an adjustment period for her. The technology that the school provided was helpful. They provided resources for mental health workers to call if she chose to, or other kids chose to, but it still was definitely different being able to do your homework and then go sit on the back deck instead of going on the yard and socializing and communicating with people who were there doing the same thing. I think the second thing, which is really more important, is my 15-year-old who was in school, enjoying sports, enjoying everything else. And he's been playing with contact every day of his life, if you will. And so now, tremendous. And if some choose to show up at that, we keep 6 foot to 8 foot. There's no one pickup on. There's no way to exert that energy. So other might need to be taking place. Sometimes I encourage him to do push-ups. I encourage him to go, running in the streets to get his energy out. Obviously, me get older, I don't dare try to, but I encourage him to do what he needs to do. So the long and short is that we can expect pretty much some of the similar things we do as adults and kids, especially the older kids. And so you're looking at them, looking at how their life has been implemented on the drop of a dime. and you have to be sensitive to what they're going through, and just keep your eyes and your ears and your heart open. Would be my suggestion.
Thank you both for your answers. I definitely can resonate with them. I would feel devastated if I was a college student right now, especially a graduate, that, you know, somebody who's missed out on their whole graduation experience.
Absolutely.
Cousins who, they're a little bit disappointed because they've missed out on their plans to walk across the stage and have their family be there to support them. So that's a grieving process, I think, that we all should be supportive of and understand.
Absolutely.
So my next question for you all will kind of be talking about how we dealt with mental health pre-corona, pre-COVID-19, and maybe what that kind of looks like for people who were getting treatment pre-COVID-19, and how that has translated for them now that we are in COVID-19. I don't know if you maybe have some examples or some insight you can share. How are people still able to get the resources that they need? And maybe it's somebody who has missed out. Maybe they're not sure where to go during COVID-19. Maybe you also have some resources that you can share so that people can get the help they need. Dr. Parker, if you want to start, or Dr. Christian.
Okay. So a couple of things. A study, I think it was a 2015 or 2016 study, 1 in 4, or 1 to 5 people have some mental issue. So that means 25% of the population that we are engaging with on a daily basis is struggling with some sort of mental health issue and or substance use issue. So a lot of the people that were struggling with it get help, or they chose to self-medicate. Sometimes we do. Sometimes we've been doing with marijuana or alcohol or other means of to try to mute some of those challenges or depressions or feelings that we have, or we can't seem to cut off. So I would tell you that I expect it to grow at an alarming rate. I'm gonna have a bit of a shock, but you have roughly, I think the last time I heard sometime last week, 15 million people that are going to be or have filed for unemployment. Now, a significant portion of those people never thought they would be filing for unemployment in their life. It means access to goods, resources from the government, potentially, where they never thought that they would have to. They never thought they would have to be connected to stamps. Never thought that they might be connected to Medicaid. Never thought that they would be connected to any type of social activity to help them make their life work. That in and of itself is going to be traumatic for a number of people, because the cornerstone of all of our civility is our mind state. But I do believe we're more resilient than we give ourselves. We just have to arm up with the proper tools, connecting to local community organizations, Caliber, Virginia, or Hope, our company, like all across Virginia, they are making themselves available. One of the things that was very enlightening to me was that until 19, I never thought that I was a part of the governor's disaster preparedness. You know, I didn't know that we were a mandatory a part of the workforce. Then I stopped to think that grocery clerks, the people that put their life on the line to ensure that our goods and services are being delivered, were a part of it. Reality is that there are resources out there, and they are taking themselves, they're loosening restrictions, so you can FaceTime with your therapist, you can talk to them on telephone. As said, counselors need counselors. I have reached out and gotten me a little bit, so I want to be in a healthy space where I can help other people. So yes, we know that those resources are available, and we suggest everyone be afraid or ashamed. Quiet closet disease that we should ignore. We need
Dr.
to embrace
Parker.
it and push our way through.
Dr. Parker, I am going to
Okay.
I am going to send you the phone number so you can call in. Your internet is kind of clicky, and we want everyone to hear what you're saying because it's very, very good information. So if you can log out, and I'll send you
Okay.
the information for the last part of the webinar. Is that okay? Great.
Okay, so what I'll do is, and I'll just kind of go off of what Dr. Parker was just talking about. And I saw a couple of questions in the chat that I think will answer part of this too. So Courtney, to your question, pre-COVID-19, what did mental health look like in the Black community? So first things first is that mental health in the Black community pre-COVID-19 looked like a stigma. It looked like things we didn't want to talk about, right? So it looked like individuals who did not want to access services, individuals who believed that if we prayed, everything would go away, individuals who believed that counseling was for non-Black people. And much of that, quite frankly, is not our fault. That is linked to generational trauma in the Black community. And our generational trauma in this country is indeed linked to slavery. That is the darkest period of history in the United States of America. We moved from slavery to Jim Crow. We moved from Jim Crow to then crack cocaine as an epidemic that hit our community. We then moved to the school to prison pipeline. We've moved to economic disparities, et cetera. And so because of that, we have passed that stress on from generation to generation to generation. And we have seemingly taught ourselves that as Black people, we are just supposed to suffer and struggle. That is false. That is a fallacy. As a people, our lives are not meant to be full of strife, struggle, and pain. We deserve to get the help that we need because we deserve to live actualized lives. Now, post-COVID-19, and I would even say current COVID-19 and post-COVID-19, I do think this will begin to look different because it is becoming socially acceptable to access a counselor in this current plight. What you will also find is that some employers may actually suggest that you do so as well if there's some difficulty transitioning back into work and into the community. One of the benefits of COVID-19, and Dr. Parker was talking about this, is now we have telehealth. And so you can actually call your counselor or use their platform and they'll log you in and be able to talk with them and meet with them. You can also do that for your medical providers as well, because what we know is that the statistics and the data just reflect that our community does not always go to the doctor. And so we have a lot of pre-existing conditions that when you compound them with stress, with anxiety, and with trauma, present for a very unhealthy person. Here is my hope, and here is what I hope we do in policy. I hope that we continue to make telehealth mental health services accessible. Let me say this to those who are technologically savvy. Don't let your grandparent or your parent sit there and not get the help that they need because we don't know how to access information. If you have to write every step out for your loved one to be able to access treatment, that's okay too. And so I would say again, pre-COVID-19, mental health in the Black community often looked like a stigma, or it often looked like services of lesser quality. People believe that. I think current COVID-19 and post-COVID-19 will begin to see an increase with accessing counseling throughout the Black community.
Okay, thank you both. We are now going to move to our Q&A portion of this webinar. I will be pulling some questions from our chat that our participants have been putting in while we have been having our discussion. The first question is from Miss Jacqueline Woody. She wants to know, well, she says, also our senior population has specific mental health needs. Would you also speak to strategies that might help? If Dr. Christian, if you want to start, since you kind of already talking about how we as a younger generation need to step up a little bit and help them with telehealth.
Absolutely, that's a really good question. I would say that we actually have And I encourage anyone, if you have a person of advanced age in your life, first things first, look at the medication that they're taking. Oftentimes, a doctor may give them an antidepressant that's really linked to their age, right? And that's okay. You have the right to research all of that medication. In the senior population, you may begin to see an acceptance of mortality. Even so, in COVID-19, you may hear your, seniors say, "Well, if it's my time, it's my time," and there becomes just an acceptance, which we have to kind of qualify: is it acceptance, or are you speaking from a place of depression? Here is what we can do with our senior population. And it is difficult because we know our seniors are such a vulnerable pocket regarding COVID-19. If you are healthy and you've been able to maintain your social distancing, visit someone who is a bit older and encourage them to take a walk with you, to sit outside. Here is what we know. At least 15 minutes in the sun per day can increase or reduce symptoms of depression. And let me be clear, it does not eliminate it, but it can genuinely make you feel a bit better, right? So your grandma, your grandfather, whoever that person is, sit outside with them for a few. Also remind them that it's important for them to get their own help as well. I know that for a lot of our seniors who are in assisted living communities, et cetera, there's a huge fear with that because, again, you can't see them, you can't touch them. But I really encourage to have phone contact with them. The other way that we can help that community is to be advocates for that community. Whether you pay for it, whether their Medicare pays for it, whoever pays for that, each individual who is in that facility deserves the right to have quality care and services. And so please make sure you advocate for them as well.
Dr. Parker, did you want to answer the question? Or?
Yeah, no, I will take a swing at it. The first thing is I would tell you that you're also dealing with, just like Dr. Christian said, you're dealing with people who have come to the conclusion that this might be my time. We're also dealing with some of the people like potentially some of my family members who feel a sense of invincibility, even though they're in their upper 70s, and they're like, "I'm going to the grocery store. You ain't gonna tell me I can't go to the grocery store." I'm like, "Okay, well, let me tell you what. Let me go get these things for you. Let me do a drive-by and stand outside because I might be exposed and I may be asymptomatic, and I'm looking at you through the glass door, and I'll call you on the phone and we'll talk, and have communication that way." But I do feel like what Dr. Christian talks about when she speaks about being engaged, at the end of the day, if you are a mandatory or essential person out there every day, we're taking people in that are being stepped down from the hospital, from psychiatric wards. So yes, we're out there. I'm out there every day. So I don't choose to put my parents at risk, but I do drive by their house and I do stand outside the door and I do talk to them on telephone, just like I was saying a few minutes ago. And I do drive by and bring packs of chicken breast to try to keep them from doing the things that they like to do as best to my ability. So I think you have to coach them and be there to support them, and just be engaged. I think that's the key thing that Dr. Christian and I have been talking about the whole process is staying engaged with the people that your loved ones, and ensuring that they're getting their needs met.
Thank you both for your answer to that question. The next question I have is from Marlo Quarles. She would like to know, when the stay-at-home order is over, what can we do to ensure we are not fearful of going out and getting back to our lives? And maybe we could add to that, how can we better manage our anxiety or our fear? Maybe not eliminating it completely, but how do we manage it so that we can get back to our normal routine?
I think the first thing to do first is to recognize that that's a totally acceptable feeling to have. I know I have that fear. I have the fear of going to a movie theater because we're all breathing the same air. if I've got to travel somewhere and get on the plane, because we're all breathing the same air. And so I think the first thing we do is we recognize it's a totally normal fear to have. What I also recommend to do is to move in strategic order. So for instance, the first thing may just be simply going to work, right? It would be very unhealthy that when outside opens back up, for us to just simply all run outside and be outside all day, because we're not going to be able to manage those symptoms, manage our anxiety. So the first thing I would really recommend to do is to move with a system, right? Be strategic. So it may just be to go to work and come home. It may be to go to the grocery store and come home, or get gas, etc. And be very aware of what you're feeling in that moment. Let me also say, if you feel that you are becoming overwhelmed when you first move into the community, it's okay to go back home for that second, because you want to talk to your counselor to say, I was literally able to just go to the grocery store today. That's okay. That's the first step. Maybe by next week, we'll be able to go inside. And that is totally appropriate and acceptable. I think the other thing that will be important is to go out with a support system. And so, for instance, maybe you and your friend can meet at the grocery store and grocery shop together. Maybe you normally do it alone. I recommend you doing that with someone else. And I say that because we need the contact, number one. And number two, your friends know when something's not gelling with you. And so you can communicate that. I liken it to, if you are a diabetic and you were in the grocery store and your blood sugar was dropping very low, we would totally support you leaving your groceries to go home and spike your blood sugar. The same thing happens for our mental health.
Okay.
Good.
I do want to mention, to get through the questions, I'm going to just have one of you answer each question. So,
Okay.
Dr. Parker, if I could pose this next question to you, just so we can make sure that
Sure.
most of our questions are answered.
Sure.
Dr. Rambagat would like to know, what role does generational trauma have on the impact of COVID-19 on the Black community? And what kind of trauma healing groups are there to support our people who are adversely affected by health disparities?
So that's a great question. Generational trauma, from a public policy perspective, as it relates to mental health, is something that, as a Black community, if just being candid with you guys, people are always talking about the chosen people, or people who have the ability to be resilient, to come back from punch after punch after punch, is something that we do. The good thing about that is that we are resilient. The bad thing about it is sometimes we become numb to the pain that's connected to it. So the trauma groups that are out there are going to be connected to the resources that exist in the community. I don't know whether or not we get from this, after this pandemic, whether or not there'll be COVID-19 trauma groups that'll be setting up around the country. I could see that happening. I could foresee something like that taking place, because as we leave and get back to what we perceive as a normalcy of life, there'll be elements of paranoia that we'll be dealing with. So every time I'm outside and somebody gets a pollen bug up their nose and they sneeze, I'm going to think, oh my God, do they have COVID-19? So there are going to be elements that we're going to have to address, and there will be trauma that we can expect to deal with. But I expect us as a community to be able to push through it with the resources that are there, being knowledgeable and open to accept those resources as they make themselves present.
Thank you so much. So we have time for one more question. And I do want to let our participants know that we will take note of all of the questions that have been submitted today, and give them to our experts, so hopefully they can answer them. We can get the answers to your questions back to you in written format, though we won't be able to have it on the webinar today. So the last question that we have is from Elizabeth McCoon. Her question is, can you talk about African Americans in the prison populations? She says, national figures such as Brian Stevenson and others say that many of the incarcerated really have mental illnesses, which have caused their incarceration, and maybe how the prison system might be dealing with managing the mental health of their inmates during COVID-19? If one of you would like to answer.
Here's what we know about mental illness and incarceration, and specifically in the African American community. Oftentimes, our behaviors are viewed as criminal as opposed to mental health needs. Research, and I know it just because it was my research, so much of our generational trauma is linked to aggression, which is often linked to charges like assault and battery or malicious wounding. And as a result, people that look like us are often deemed more violent and are imprisoned as opposed to receiving treatment for generational trauma. So Elizabeth, that is correct in what the research is saying. Now, so when we compile COVID-19 and a person's hopefully treated trauma in the prison system now, and that feeling of being helpless, because the typical offender is going to feel helpless just in prison alone, but especially in this setting. One of the best things that we can do is, if you have a loved one who is in a correctional facility now, make sure you're having some sort of communication with them, whether you're sending an email, whether you're writing, and try to advocate for them. Are they able to get to medical? I know that's going to be very difficult, but are they able to do that in this time? I think, to look at that, and that is a system issue, right? We know that Black people have historically been viewed as more violent and are given far less grace than white people in the criminal justice system. We know that. What will be vital is that when your loved one returns home, make sure they have a support system, number one. Then make sure they're getting a physical upon return, because things like COVID-19 have been dormant. And then also make sure they're getting the counseling that they need. And I really encourage everyone to continue to advocate for those people who are in prison, because they are fighting a battle that we do not know.
Thank you. I guess I will turn it over to the president of ASALH Richmond so she can close us out.
Thank you so much, Dr. Christian, Dr. Parker. We really enjoyed your information today. We have questions, a myriad of questions in our Zoom group chat. And what we'll do is we'll get those questions out to you and you can answer them, and we'll send them out in an email to our participants. So thank you so much. And Courtney, I am so excited, and you did a wonderful job. And I love it that you have come on and you've taken this, and you did a great job on being a moderator. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, participants, for being on our first African American COVID-19 and mental health. We are excited to have a series. Our series now will be every week, and then we will go and do probably about a month or maybe every other month of webinar series that are dedicated specifically to the African American community here in the Richmond, Virginia area. And we will have others, not just here in Richmond, Virginia, but we'll bring on national speakers, we'll bring on local and regional speakers. So I want to thank everyone for coming on today. I would like to also thank our board. We have our executive director, Sylvia Cyrus, on. We also have our president from ASALH National, Dr. Evelyn Higginbotham, on as well. So we want to thank everyone for joining in. And if you can see on the screen, the contact information for our panelists, Dr. Dennis Parker and Dr. Atasha Christian, is on your screen. And if you have any questions, you can email them. Their phone number is there attached. And it seems right here, I see Dr. Parker has his Motivated Males to Men book as well that you can get on Amazon. So again, thank you for joining ASALH Richmond, our webinar series, African Americans, COVID-19, and mental health. We look forward to serving our community soon. See you next week. Bye-bye.